Marcus wiped down the counter of Earth Home Cooking for the third time that hour, not because it needed it, but because his hands needed something to do. Outside the diner's wide viewport, rain streaked down the station's outer glass in long, trembling lines, as if the sky itself were trying to escape. The space station outpost Kestrel 9. If you believe the faded lettering on the corridor maps hung in slow orbit around a forgotten moon, at the edge of charted lanes. The moon was a cold, cratered thing with no name anyone bothered to say out loud. Most of the businesses on Level 7 had shut down months ago. The holosigns still blinked in stubborn loops above empty storefronts, advertising menus and music and souvenirs for travelers who no longer came. Marcus kept his own sign on anyway. Earth Home Cooking. It said in cheerful script above the door. Beneath it, in smaller letters, soup, bread, pie, coffee. He was lucky to see 5 customers on a good day. On bad days like this, when the docking lanes were quiet and the station announcements sounded tired, he saw none. The automated service drone offered to help him close early, its voice sweet and false. No, Marcus told it, as he always did. We stay open because you never knew, because people got hungry, because if he shut the doors, it would feel like giving in. The door hissed open. Marcus lifted his head, practiced smile already forming his welcome to Earth Home Cooking. Can I get you something warm? Smile, and then the smile faltered. 2 children stood in the threshold. They were small, maybe 7 or 8 by human standards, though Marcus knew better than to guess with species he didn't know well. Their skin was a deep ocean blue that caught the diner's warm light and made them look almost wet, even before you noticed the rain on their cheeks and tunics. Their eyes were large, amber, and reflective like polished stone. They blinked up at him with the wary stillness of kids who'd learned, too early, not to assume adults were safe. Their clothes were simple brown tunics too thin for the station's cold corridors, and both of them hugged themselves, as if trying to hold their heat inside. The smaller one, a boy, had bare feet. The taller one, a girl, stood half a step in front of him, her shoulders squared with effort. We're hungry, she said. Her voice barely carried past the hum of the vents. Please, sir, we haven't eaten in 2 days. Something tightened in Marcus's chest. He'd seen refugees on Kestrel 9 before, families who had missed a jump window, workers whose contracts had collapsed, travelers stranded when a shipping company folded. He'd seen hungry adults with hard eyes and soft lies. But children were different. Children still expected the universe to make sense, even when it didn't. Marcus glanced past them into the corridor, searching for a parent, a guardian, a security officer. Someone who would explain why 2 blue-skinned kids were standing in his doorway, like it was their last option. No one. He softened his voice. Hey, come on in. It's warmer. They hesitated, then stepped over the threshold like crossing into a different gravity. The door sealed behind them with a sigh, shutting out the corridor's sterile chill. Marcus crouched slightly behind the counter so he wouldn't loom. Where are your folks? The boy's gaze dropped to the tiles. He curled his toes against the floor as if surprised by the warmth. The girl swallowed. Mama had to go away. Go away where? She said she'd come back. The girl's jaw tightened. But it's been 3 days. 3 days. Anger flared quick and bright in Marcus, aimed at a faceless adult. What kind of parent left 2 children on a half-empty station and didn't come back? What kind of world made that feel normal? He pushed the anger down because the kids didn't need it. They needed food. They needed someone who didn't make them explain more than they could. "All right," he said, and nodded toward a booth by the viewport, the one with the cracked leather seat and the best view of the rain. "You sit down. I'll make you something." The relief that flooded their faces was so pure, so immediate, that Marcus had to turn away before he did something embarrassing like blink to hard. He moved to the stove, hands going into motions he'd practiced for years. He kept ingredients for moments like this. Real ingredients. A pot, water, broth cubes he'd traded for at the docking market, dried noodles, the kind that swelled soft and honest. He had actual chicken lab-grown, but close enough, and carrots and onion. As the soup warmed, the diner filled with a smell that didn't belong on level 7. Comfort. Marcus sliced bread and set it to toast, then checked the pie case. There were 2 slices of apple left, the crust golden, the filling glossy with cinnamon. He carried the first bowls out himself, steam curling upward like ghosts. The children stared at the food as if it might vanish. "It's yours," Marcus said gently. "Eat." They did. They ate with the single-minded desperation of the truly hungry, spoon after spoon, not talking except for the tiny sounds of swallowing. Marcus set the bread between them and watched their hands small. Careful hands reach for it like a ritual. He brought them water too, and when the boys' shoulders finally relaxed, when the girls' eyes softened from panic into something like cautious hope, Marcus sat in the booth across from them with his coffee. "I'm Marcus," he said. The girl paused with her spoon. "Kira." The boy, still focused on his soup, said quietly, "John." "Kira and John," Marcus repeated, making sure he got it right. "Okay, that's good. You two. What species are you?" Kira's chin lifted. "We're Nexuri." Marcus had heard the name once, maybe in passing on a newsfeed. A proud people from somewhere farther out than most humans bothered to travel. He didn't know much beyond that. He didn't let it show. "Nexuri," he said as if it was familiar. "All right. Can you digest Earth food okay?" Kira nodded. "We can digest many foods." "Good." He tapped the table lightly. "So, where have you been sleeping?" The children exchanged a glance, one of those glances kids have when they're trying to decide whether an adult deserves the truth. "In a maintenance alcove," John admitted. "Near the vents." Marcus swallowed. The station's maintenance alcoves were narrow and dusty and sometimes used by people who didn't want to be found. Kira straightened, pride slipping into her voice like armor. "Our mama is very important," she said between bites. "She has to do important work. That's why she had to leave." "Important work," Marcus echoed carefully. "What kind of work?" John shrugged without looking up. Kira hesitated, uncomfortable. "She doesn't tell us, but everyone respects her. Everyone bows." Marcus tried not to let his skepticism show. "Important, respected." Bowed to he'd heard versions of that story before. A mid-level official, a corporate rep, someone who made big speeches about duty and forgot their kids existed when duty got inconvenient. He looked at their bowls, already half empty. "Well," he said, "whatever she's doing, you still have to eat." Kira nodded fiercely as if this was obvious, and the galaxy was the one being unreasonable. When they finished their soup, Marcus cut the pie slices in half, slid them over, and watched their eyes widen at the sweetness. "No charge," he said when Kira started to speak. "Don't argue with me." Their gratitude was almost painful. When they left that first night, he packed them leftovers in a sealed container and wrapped the bread in a thermal cloth. Kira held it like treasure. John clutched the container to his chest as if afraid someone would take it. They turned back at the diner's door. "Thank you," Kira said, formal and earnest. Marcus lifted a hand in a wave. "Come back tomorrow if you're hungry." They did. The next morning, Marcus was unlocking the diner when two small shapes appeared at the end of the corridor. They walked quickly, glancing around like prey, then relaxed the instant they spotted him. From then on, Kira and John became fixtures in Earth home cooking. They came when he opened and stayed until the station lights dimmed. They claimed the corner booth and spread out their homework tablet sheets in galactic standard. Math symbols Marcus didn't recognize, language drills that sounded like clipped, careful recordings. They spoke with the precision of kids who'd learned the common tongue from language chips. Rather than conversation, in exchange for meals, Marcus let them help. John wiped tables with intense seriousness. Kira learned to stack dishes without dropping them, her tongue poking out in concentration. Marcus taught them how to flip pancakes. Their laughter filled the diner in a way the old speakers never could. Kira taught Marcus an auxiliary counting game that involved tapping fingers in patterns across the table. John taught him a song soft and rhythmic that sounded like waves. Marcus caught himself looking forward to their arrival, feeling the day settle into place only once they were there, but in the quiet moments. When Kira was bent over her lessons and John was making careful letters with the tip of his stylus, Marcus worried. 3 days turned into 5, 5 into 7. He asked around the station as discreetly as he could. No one had heard of Nexuri children missing. No security bulletin. No frantic parent at the desk. Nothing on the public boards. It was like they'd appeared out of nowhere, washed in on the tide of the station's endless traffic, and then forgotten. On the 7th night, after he'd watched them leave with full bellies and tired eyes, Marcus stood behind the counter and stared at the comm unit. Station social services existed, technically. There was a processing office on level 3, behind reinforced glass, staffed by overworked clerks who dealt with runaway contracts and undocumented travelers. If he reported the kids, they'd be placed in temporary care, scanned, tagged, evaluated. They'd be fed, yes, but they'd also be separated, questioned, perhaps moved off station. And if their mother truly was important, if everyone bows, then reporting them might draw attention that could be dangerous. But leaving them in a vent alcove was dangerous too. On the 8th morning, Marcus decided. Today, he told himself. Today I call. He didn't get the chance. That evening, the diner's door hissed open, and the air changed. Marcus felt it before he saw her the way the room seemed to tighten, as if gravity itself had stepped inside. The station's hum dipped beneath something heavier, a presence that made the lights feel dimmer and the shadows sharper. A woman entered. She was Nixuri blue-skinned, amber-eyed but unmistakably adult, tall and commanding. Black armor covered her body, matte and strange, the kind of material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her dark hair fell in a thick braid threaded with silver that could have been premature gray, or something ceremonial. Faint scars marked her cheekbones and the edge of her jaw-thin lines that spoke of combat and survival. Behind her, two figures in military uniforms stood in the corridor at attention, their hands clasped behind their backs. They didn't step in, but the way they watched the room made Marcus feel suddenly like he'd been standing in the open all his life and only now realized it. Through the viewport, beyond the rain-streaked glass, a ship loomed in space. Not a freighter, not a shuttle, a battle cruiser massive, angular, bristling with silent weapon mounts. Its hull marked with insignias Marcus didn't know but felt in his bones. It dwarfed the station like a predator circling prey. Marcus's mouth went dry. At the corner booth, Kira and John looked up from their homework. For half a heartbeat, their faces went blank with disbelief. Then both of them launched themselves from the booth. "Mama!" they cried in unison. The woman's severe expression shattered. She dropped to her knees, armor hitting the floor with a heavy thunk, and caught them in a fierce embrace. She pressed her face into their hair, holding them like she'd been afraid they were a dream that might vanish if she blinked. "My stars," she whispered, voice breaking. "My little stars. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Kira clung to her neck. John buried his face against her shoulder and made a sound Marcus had never heard from Hinraw. And relieved, Marcus stood frozen behind the counter, heart hammering, mind trying to fit this moment into something he understood. This wasn't neglect. This was grief. This was terror held back by discipline until it finally broke. After a long moment, the woman stood, keeping one hand on each child's shoulder as if anchoring them to reality. She turned her gaze toward Marcus. The weight of it hit him like pressure. "You fed my children," she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus cleared his throat. They were hungry. The woman studied him. Up close, Marcus could see exhaustion carved into her face, the tightness around the eyes, the faint tremor she controlled with willpower. This was someone who had not slept properly in days. Someone who'd carried a burden too heavy to put down. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. Marcus swallowed. "No, ma'am." Something like relief flickered across her features, sharp and fleeting. "My name is Liara," she said. "I am Supreme Commander of the Nexa Fleet." The words landed like a hammer. Marcus's mind scrambled. Nexa Fleet, Nixuri, Supreme Commander. That wasn't a mid-level bureaucrat. That was he didn't even know the scale of it. Liara's jaw tightened as if she could taste the memory. The Svian conflict ended 3 hours ago. I have been in combat negotiations for 9 days straight, unable to leave, unable to even send word. Marcus had heard of the conflict. Everyone had. It was on every station feed. A war threatening to spill across 3 sectors. Trade routes collapsing. worlds bracing for invasion. Millions of lives balanced on decisions made in rooms no civilians ever saw. Liara continued, her voice hardening. My security team was tasked with keeping Kira and John safe. Their ship was destroyed in the opening assault. Kira's fingers tightened on her mother's arm. John's eyes dropped. Liara inhaled, steadying herself. When I returned, there was nothing but wreckage and silence. I found them through station surveillance, tracing their movements. They led me here. Marcus felt the floor tilt. His legs went unsteady, not from fear exactly, but from the sudden shift in the universe's shape. These were not stray children. These were the children of someone who could end wars. I didn't know, Marcus said, because it was the only thing his stunned brain could manage. Liara's gaze softened, just a fraction. I'm glad you didn't. She reached into a compartment in her armor and pulled out a credit chip, placing it on the counter with a deliberate, careful motion. The chip gleamed faintly, a simple object that somehow radiated value. This represents the entire budget of a small planet, she said. It is not enough for what you have done, but it is what I can give. Marcus stared at it like it might bite him. I don't want payment, he said, voice rough. They're good kids. Anyone would've. No. Liara's interruption was gentle, but absolute. Not anyone. Marcus blinked. Most would have called authorities. She continued, eyes steady on his, had them processed, separated, filed away as an administrative problem. You gave them food without asking what they could offer in return. You gave them safety. You gave them kindness. Her voice lowered, and for a moment she sounded less like a commander and more like a mother barely holding herself. Together, in a galaxy where I command fleets and negotiate the fates of worlds, she said, I could not protect my own children. But you did. Liara placed her hand over her heart in an auxiliary gesture, formal, precise, weighted with meaning. Marcus had seen Kira do something similar when she thanked him, but this felt different. This was not polite gratitude. This was oath. In the corridor, the two uniformed officers mirrored the gesture, hands to their chests, eyes forward. Through the viewport, on the distant bridge of the battle cruiser, Marcus could see silhouettes, more officers standing still, their hands rising in unison. A fleet paying respect to a diner owner. Liara's voice carried the gravity of law. The Nexeri honor their debts. Marcus's throat tightened. I just fed them. Liara stepped closer. If ever you need anything, she said, anything at all, your ship repaired, your debts erased, your enemies silenced, your name protected, you have but to call my name, and I will move stars to answer. Marcus looked down at Kira and John. They were smiling at him, wide and unguarded now, their gap-toothed grins bright as station lights. John's cheeks were still shiny from tears he hadn't wiped. Kira's eyes glittered with a fierce affection that made Marcus's chest ache. He exhaled slowly, the tension unspooling into something almost like laughter. Just bring them by sometimes, he said. For pancakes, for a heartbeat. Liara looked as if she didn't know what to do with a request so small. Then her expression softened into something that might have been a smile, rare, careful, and real. Every week, she promised. If the galaxy can spare me. Kira tugged at her mother's hand. He makes them fluffy, she announced proudly, as if that settled everything. John nodded solemnly. "And the syrup is warm." Liara's eyes flicked to the pie case, to the soup pot, to the simple diner that smelled like bread and cinnamon in the middle of a forgotten station. Then every week, she repeated, quieter, the children began to guide their mother toward the door like excited tour guides, talking over each other about counting games and pie, and how Marcus had taught them to flip pancakes without burning them mostly. As they reached the threshold, Kira turned back. "Thank you, Marcus," she called, voice clear, "for being our friend." John echoed softly, "Friend." Marcus lifted a hand, throat too tight for words, and watched them go. The door hissed shut behind them. For a long moment, Earth Home Cooking was silent again except for the hum of vents and the faint rattle of rain. Against the viewport, Marcus sank onto a stool behind the counter and stared at the credit chip. A fortune, a planet's budget, enough to buy a new life 10 times over. He set it down gently, as if it were fragile. Outside, the battle cruiser began to turn, thrusters firing in slow, controlled bursts. It moved with impossible grace for something so enormous, sliding away from the station toward whatever awaited it among the stars. Marcus watched until it was only a dark shape against darker space. He thought about power, about the kind that commanded fleets and ended wars, and the kind that kept a small diner open on a dead level of a dying station, because someone might need soup. He thought about strength, how it looked like armor and authority, and how it also looked like a tired man saying, "Sit down, I'll make you something." He thought about a woman who could negotiate the fate of worlds, but could not be there when her children were hungry. And he thought about 2 little kids who had simply needed someone to care. Marcus stood, tied on his apron again, and went back to the stove. Tomorrow, he'd make extra soup, extra bread, extra batter for pancakes. Because after all, you never knew who might walk through your door.